Hey, how are you doing?
Good. How are you doing?
Doing well. Thanks so much for making time for this interview today. I know things are busy at VGS. So, Colin, I know that you've been involved with early growth and late growth companies. What is the biggest difference in terms of cash flow for these two types?
Yeah, so I'd say with a lot of the early growth companies, we're basically raising money to fund our growth. So we're a little more cash conscious, but we know that the money when we're in an early stage that we're investing upfront. So we're probably like kind of outsizing, our team for necessarily like what our revenue is. So like in this case, our cost of acquisitions, so our CAC to LTV, and as well as our payback period, we know we'll see like a spike because as we're like hiring like, more sales reps, more CS reps, as we're just starting to mature our customer cohorts, we know that, we're going to be expending more for less revenue, but that will catch up as we continue to scale. And so that's why like, right now we're in our Series C, like we raised, like that money is really for us to scale up our resources to like continue growing our revenue. Once you get into like a kind of like a later stage, that's where you expect like a lot of those KPIs or numbers to like start going down, start getting like within industry benchmarks, so you have a more like repeatable business or repeatable motion. So like right now we're kind of nailing a lot of stuff down, doing a lot of experimentation, a lot of testing, but we know that we're doing a lot of upfront upfront, I can't think of the word right now. Yeah, we're just putting a lot of money up front to get that growth. So that's the main difference right now. Whereas, if we still have those numbers high when we're getting to the later stages, that's when, something's probably not working. But we're kind of where we're at right now, which is expected. We're like I believe our payback period is probably about 20 months. Industry standard is about 12 months. But we should expect to get there as we scale.
Okay.
Upfront investment, that was the word I was looking for.
Right. Upfront investment. Yeah, no, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Getting on the front end so you can then get those returns later on.
Yeah.
Yeah, and just a quick question on that, because I know a lot of people tend to think of the fast growing startup as kind of like immediately gaining traction. But are there like any kind of time ranges? Like, because I know it differs from company to company, but like an early growth company, like how many years is like the average for that kind of focus on like fundraising and upfront investment?
Yeah, so I mean, that could be extended if you like pivot or do like a large change in strategy. But generally, a lot of these companies are like, say, like when I was at like a company like TalkDesk previously, when we're still getting like market fit, a lot of the companies we're selling into are what I would consider like early adopters, or like would be kind of like mid market, like lower end commercial segmentation. These are companies which are usually maybe there's only one or two decision makers. It's a little easier to like get in and see like, who we're selling to and like how to get like a deal closed. As you get like more market traction, you have more companies actually coming to you, like larger companies, as you continue to go up market. That's when you start getting into, what we call like an enterprise motion, where it's going to be like more sophisticated, larger organizations with, like standard, like more formalized procurement processes, legal teams, a lot of different stakeholders. But once again, like, right now, like the companies we're selling to, like these are like what I like to call like little like, quick hits, or like the kind of like the little pebbles and rocks to get to our goal. We're seeing sales cycles of like 45 to 60 days, but we also do have some like enterprise sales cycles right now where those are taking, probably like 4, 5, 6 months. But once we get to a place like where we're scaling, we're going to keep moving our like human resources, or our high cost resources, further up the segmentation pyramid. And we'll start seeing a lot more of these like longer sales cycles, a lot larger like lands or like average deal sizes.
Right.
And then we're starting to build out like a robust self-service motion. And the goal is there to like keep raising the bar and be able to service larger and larger customers with a self-service or very low human touch. And that's like kind of like a force multiplier for your team, because you don't want to scale your sales organization or your CS organization kind of like one-to-one to your growth. You want to start getting like a flywheel effect and start seeing a multiplication for every head you add. You'll get more and more revenue from each head.
Right. No, that makes sense. And especially with the self-service portal, because I've been to VGS and I've logged in and kind of experimented with, the self-service portion. That makes it, I think, a really good asset to invest in, is to put resources into developing that. So that way people join as you continue, you can focus on the higher scale clients, enterprise clients that take longer. Yeah. Yeah, no, that's great. So how can these new businesses and startups lay the foundation for like a streamlined instruct spend management and cash flow process as all these kind of expenses start to accumulate?
Yeah. Yeah. So, if you talk to our controller Wilson right now, he'd give you the story, like, you kind of come in, you're trying to piece everything together, get a picture of what we're spending and like what we're spending it on. And then really from there, it's like, at least when I think like in my world, like in revenue operations, when we look at like, say, our tool stack, our productivity tools, are there a lot of things that are there different tools that are doing like the same thing? Is there a lot of overlap? Can we consolidate and like get a really clear idea of our expenditure month over month and like align our budgets with that? And definitely for like us right now, say like we're renegotiating any sort of vendor contract or with any external party, we always like really like are, cash flow conscious, and like instead of like signing, like a annual upfront or like a multi-year upfront contract with like a vendor, like we'd be like, okay, can we get the same terms on quarterly? We're a little cash conscious. We want to make sure we watch our cash flow. So, we have, money coming in, but we don't want such a large outflow that, our cash on hand is like going down like faster than we have it forecasted, because like we are watching our runway. So we want to make sure we're being like fiscally responsible there, and really balancing the inflow and outflow.
Yeah, definitely. And so in addition to inflow, outflow, and these things that you mentioned, what else do you track when you're looking at cash flow?
Yeah. So when we're looking like at the inflow outflow, but in addition to that, we also, like I said, we are like, we have all of our runway forecasted out. So we do have budgets applied to all of that. Another thing like with hiring, we're really conscious of is something called location factor. So right now, for instance, at VGS, we're, say like location factor 1 is the San Francisco Bay Area, which is obviously one of like the most kind of like expensive markets. But we are a remote first company and a distributed company. So, we strive for, as a company of VGS, to be at, I believe it's like a 0.6 location factor. So we're really conscious with our hiring and where we're hiring and where we are finding talent. That's like something that's like very integral into like when we look at our cash flow. Then on top of that, it's, we're starting to do things like actually like look at, VAT for like international customers, like different things around like taxation. Make sure we account for that when we're selling contracts now, and we're not like incurring those costs. Something else at VGS, we also do have this concept of pass through or like third party services, say like an audit and like a pen test. Those are things that are on our books, and we need to make sure that we do recognize those at the right time, and like our rev rec is lined up with the the expectation in the contract, and stuff hits our books at the correct time.
Okay, that makes perfect sense, especially if you're looking abroad and getting these international clients, because I know that's also a very big factor with that and GST from country to country. So how granular are you when it comes to reporting? I'm imagining it's pretty granular from what you've told me already, but how deep do you really go?
Yeah, so I mean, we have two main models. We have our basically what we would call our cost model. So that's everything, going into the budget. And then that's what like basically informs like what our runway is and what our cash expenditure is. And then our other piece is what we call our revenue build. And so that essentially is, looking at, not only our base of customers, but, who we're adding, when we're adding, how much we're adding, in which segments, by which like product line, and then laddering up like all of our like headcount for our go-to-market team. So like, SDR, sales, CS, and building up all the quotas and goals into that to like hit a goal, which will tie into our cash expenditure. And then that will be like our ARR growth. And that's basically, what informs, when and if we need to fundraise more. Are we on track to plan? Is the plan we have in place correct? Like there's a lot of leading indicators we'd see in there. If there's like different pieces of, say, like our funnel or like pipeline build or our execution on pipeline, there's leading and lagging indicators that we all look at. A lot of data that flows into there is like, what we look at week over week, month over month. We do make tweaks to the models, but generally like, one informs the other.
Right. And as a company that provides compliance as a service, So that requires so much investment, as you said, in employees, partnerships, funnels, significant data infrastructure as well. How does that affect your pricing or costs for your product?
Yeah, so yeah, that'd be like our COGS. So our COGS, we generally have two sets. There is a COGS for our SaaS products. That would be things like Vault, or like our compliance subscription. That generally, those expenditures are really, related to things like, AWS hosting, the actual engineers and product teams, which are involved in developing those products or maintaining them. And those are that's like a fairly flat COG. I'd say like across the board. And we do know we have a specific margin for our SaaS, and that's like, SaaS is some like the highest margin you can get of selling anything, rather than selling like something, an actual like thing or object like SaaS. Like there's generally very high margins on it. Then on the other hand, we have what we call our non-recurring revenue. So that would be like the things like the third-party audits and pen tests, or even we do audits with team members internally that will conduct audits for our customers. And we know that if we apply like a human to something, like the cost there goes up, and our margins are significantly lower, but we try to stay within like a 30% margin on that piece,
Right.
which is generally like a kind of a benchmark for the industry. And then there's other things layered in, like some professional services, like integrations that fall in the same bucket. Anything like if a customer opts in for enterprise support, that's a separate cost in itself, because those are actual people, fielding tickets, interacting with the customer, working on different like things like bugs or different issues. So those are like kind of like the two main like things we look at, and like how like our costs are broken out. And then like say like when we pass things through, like we sign a contract, that stuff's like coded in like different GL codes, and then that stuff gets sent over into like our rev rec system.
Right. That makes perfect sense. So moving from, we talked about expenses, we've talked a little bit about income. What do you recommend for startups who are trying to forecast future scenarios?
Yeah. So I think with when you're early stage, like forecasting, I think it's a little bit of a shot in the dark. Like you do have like something aspirational. Say you want to like, say you're at like 5 million in ARR, you want to double to 10 million ARR in a year. It's a matter of figuring out, what really are like kind of like the different, I would say different KPIs or like different leading indicators for you to like actually inform like what your headcount would be, like what is your, annualized productivity out of each head you add, and being able to unitize that, be like, okay, so, we have 5 reps right now, we're at 5 million ARR, we can expect each rep to carry a quota of like, say like $200,000 a year. And we have like a productivity assumption. So the assumption there is like, generally you want, productivity of like 75, 80% across the board. So that's like quota achievement. So that's what we would like to call like a winning locker room. So like right now, specifically, like with our number of heads, we expect like 80% productivity. From there, we expect, X amount of bookings to materialize. And then in our existing base, we begin to look at, like customers within the segment, start getting like a better pulse on what our expected growth is from each of those customers. And then we like have like, once again, like our land ARR and then our expansion ARR. We try to ladder those up into a goal and kind of like do a bottoms up or tops down look on if that goal is achievable based on, a number of assumptions, our hiring plan, and then just like the general kind of like goals of the company.
No, that makes perfect sense. So my last question I really wanted to know was, what other advice would you give to any fintech entrepreneurs or small business owners today in terms of monitoring their finances and cash flow?
Yeah, so I think for a lot of these like earlier stage fintechs or like an early stage startup, it's all about focus. I mean, if you know where you're winning, that's where you want to double down. You don't necessarily want to go in too many different directions at once and make a lot of like I'd say like salient investments in other places. Really concentrate on your core product offering, and really make sure like you're getting market fit and traction there before you go beyond that. So it's okay to experiment, try to go up market, or do some things like test beta products with like a limited set of customers, but you don't want to get in a situation where you're trying to go up market too quick. You're dealing with a lot of enterprise customers, you're kind of beholden to them. They want you to do a lot of custom builds. They have a lot of feature requests. So you basically are, it's kind of to the detriment of your core product. You're building out all these features specifically for a customer, and like things could like break eventually. So it's all about, kind of playing in the space where you're comfortable until you're ready to like move on. And like I said, getting that traction and like market fit early and often, and make sure like you are like really focused with, you know, your use cases, who you're selling to, you know, going after like companies and really having like your ICPs and your buy-in personas down.
Yeah, 100% having those fundamentals down are crucial, I think, to success in any viable long-term way.
Yeah.
No, that's great. Thank you so much, Colin.